David Hale from ESPN at a David Hale joint on Twitter. ESPN.com. ACC Scribe joins us on the Adam Gold Show. I mean, if you only watched the first drive, it was pretty good. Overall, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. If you were like, if you timed your drunkenness so that you just blacked out after the first drive, holy crap, you had a great night last night. But yeah, unfortunately, things kind of deteriorated a tad for the North Carolina faithful after that. At least most of them were smart enough to leave and not spend the entire second half watching that debacle.
It was I thought, and I'm trying to put a positive spin on it. I mean, I'm at home, I'm not at the game, and I thought, man, if you can get a stop right here to start the second half, maybe you get some points on the board. You're not out of it. You're only 2 scores down now. If you can get this manageable, keep it, and then untouched 75-yard touchdown run, and we were pretty much done at that point. Could you find anything positive for UNC really after that first drive?
Well, there's 2 things that I thought were really good after the first drive. The one is as somebody who is emotionally tied into a good story, was very happy for Max Johnson.
Sure.
That was a cool thing to see. And then 2 is mercifully it ended. And other than that, no, there was nothing at all to be excited about. That was, after that first drive, truly about as inept a football performance as I've ever seen. And I watched a lot of Florida State last year, so this is not a low bar. There is a lot. I've seen some bad football. On both sides of the ball, offensively, zero clue what in the heck you were doing. 2 hours passed without a completed pass.
Yeah.
Just horrendous. And defensively, it looked like guys who were not just bad at tackling, just didn't want to. It was so horrible. I genuinely it. I don't even know how you characterize it as anything other than just a complete and total debacle.
I felt like David Hale is joining us from ESPN.com. I felt as though UNC was just very easily blocked last night. Like on that 75-yard touchdown run, that's a touchdown if we're playing one-hand touch. There were and it wasn't even a gaping hole to run through. He got through the line untouched, and then he just kind of, one cut out to the right, and Carolina looked slow. I thought they looked in too many spots on the field unathletic, like they couldn't change direction. Maybe you get that with 70 new players from a year ago.
Yeah, look, there's a lot that goes into this. You don't get beat like that for one reason. You get beat like that for a dozen or more reasons. But there's really 2 things that I'll point to. One, a lot of people wanted to compare this to Dion overhauling the Colorado roster, which was never a fair comparison. One, that Colorado team still finished 4-8, so let's, it was not exactly like a great comparison. But 2 years ago, you could overhaul your roster, and you could find legitimate talent. In this year with RevShare, teams aren't letting their best players go into the portal. Every school in America that wants to keep their best players can keep them because they've got at least $7, $8, $9, $10 million to pay for player retention. So what was in the portal, the 70 guys they added, the stock in that pond was very, very limited compared to previous years. So I went into this game assuming Carolina was not going to be super talented. What I did not count on was how utterly unprepared they seemed. And, out of position, bad game planning. And look, I've said from the beginning, people wanted to point at Jordan Hudson and say, oh, what a distraction. Mm-hmm. The problem was the nepotism on the coaching staff. He's got a guy who hasn't called plays in years and Freddie Kitchen calling plays. He's got his GM's son coaching the quarterbacks. He's got 2 of his sons on staff. He's got a bunch of journeyman assistants like Bob Diaco and Derek McGee. Like, it is a bad, by any metric, coaching staff that he is working with. Bill may be a genius. I'm sure he is. But it takes more than one guy, and I think that really showed up last night. And then, the other thing that I would say is I think it looked to me like Carolina really bought into the "we've got Bill Belichick" hype. And when they got punched in the mouth and they weren't great, it very much reminded me of many teams I've seen in the past who had their balloon deflated quickly and had no second gear to shift into.
David Hale from ESPN.com is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. And their next game, which, by the way, is Saturday, so they had 2 fewer days to prepare. Now, Bill is used to that because he's dealt with it in the NFL before. But, look, Charlotte's not good either, but North Carolina didn't show enough to it shouldn't give anybody confidence that they're going to go down there. I can't believe they're 2 touchdown favorites in that game, but they are. To me, they could lose that game based on what I watched. I watched ineptitude. I watched easy drops. I watched what probably was guys lined up incorrectly. Anything could happen down there.
Yeah, look, that team last night, that performance would have lost a game to almost every team in FBS probably. Like, that was a bottom 10 performance. Now, having said that, I watched some of the Charlotte game, and that also may have been a bottom 10 performance. So, look, this might be a really unpleasant pillow fight on Saturday. If Carolina doesn't look much better in that game, boy, oh boy, you got some trouble. I can sort of wrap my head around, like, the moment was so big, and TCU is a very good team, I think, that those things coalesced into what was a performance by Carolina that probably speaks volumes as to who they are, but also was probably the low end of what they're capable of.
Right.
So if they get more to the median of what they're capable of, they should beat the crud out of Charlotte. But, I don't know. It's funny, a lot of people that I talk to, like, first of all, the conversation about Carolina all offseason was, well, look at the schedule. Well, now I look at the schedule and say, I don't know how many of those games they can win, let alone how many games that they should win.
Right.
But, again, I remember a few years back when David Cutcliffe, who was beloved in Duke, like, losing to Charlotte was basically the end of the David Cutcliffe era in Durham. This is game 2 for Belichick, so I don't know that you can say the same. But, yeah, you cannot go down to Charlotte and lose that game or even look bad. You have to look competent on Saturday or the wheels really, really come off.
Yeah, David Hale is joining us here. The conference schedule, which looked so easy, doesn't look as easy. Cal got a win on the road at a competent team, beating Oregon State. Virginia thumped Coastal Carolina. I know Syracuse didn't win, but I don't think Syracuse is bad by any stretch. They're up there. Wake Forest didn't look good. Duke certainly did after the first half, and NC State, who knows, that rivalry game could be crazy. But yeah, it's not as easy. Let me just throw a couple of ACC things at you, David Hale from ESPN, at a David Hale joint. I want to start with Florida State's destruction of Alabama. I know this is being thrown around as what happened to Alabama, and certainly a lot of it was that. But I was stunned to see how dominant FSU was at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah.
How did you see that game? Is Florida State could they be good?
I think I am still a little skeptical on Florida State because they were good at one thing, and Alabama was so bad that they could not stop that one thing. So I wonder how much, if you expand that beyond the vacuum of that one game, what it looks like. I probably went into the season thinking FSU was a 7-5, 8-4 team. I probably now think they're 8-4, 9-3 team. I don't know that I've completely changed my opinion of FSU, but 2 things did really jump out to me. And you mentioned the first one, which is they were very, very good up front. And that was, to me, for all of the problems last year, and there were many, the offensive line, which was veteran, experienced, and a lot of holdovers from the previous year's 13-1 team, like, that was the biggest train wreck of last year, was that offensive line. Like, no one position was more disappointing than that O-line. And it looked like a completely different, I mean, it is a completely different unit, but looked much better, much better, like to a level of potentially being a dominant O-line. So, huge plus for Florida State there. And the other thing is a single play that stood out to me, which was the script had sort of flipped in the fourth quarter there, and Alabama had a lot going for it, and Florida State's facing a 4th and 1 deep in their own territory where any other coach in their right mind would have punted and played defense, and the way things are going, if it had been a year before, Alabama wins that game 10 times out of 10. But Mike Norvell, having lived through all of 2024, where that team showed zero resiliency, zero accountability, zero determination, Mike Norvell said, nah, we're going for it. And they went for it on a 4th and 1 from their own 35 and converted. And to me, it wasn't just that the play sealed the game for them. It was a statement of, we are not that team from last year. This is how we're going to do things this time around. And I think if you break down all of week one and say what was the single most important play of week one, to me, that was it.
That's awesome. All right, now to the opposite of Mike Norvell, Mario Cristobal in Miami. It seemed to me that in the fourth quarter, Cristobal was trying to actively lose the game. He completely took the air out of the ball. I didn't understand why. It seemed like they were more interested in running clock. They ran the same plays over and over again that were unsuccessful. They were fortunate. Settled for a 48-yard field goal to go ahead with over a minute left. They were fortunate that Notre Dame didn't drag them into overtime. Is Miami good enough to overcome him?
Yeah, I mean, and not just like settling for a 48-yard field goal, but from a kicker who was disastrous at FAU last year. Like, boy, oh boy, like I'm sitting there texting with my colleague Andrea Adelson, who was at the game, and I'm like, they're going to blow this, aren't they? They're going to blow it. Because we've all seen this story play out before. Yeah. It was saved, ironically, because last year was doomed by the defense. It was saved by a tremendous defensive performance. Their defensive front, like Ruben Bain and Akeem Messador, were a problem for one of the best offensive lines in college football that Notre Dame has. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was talking to somebody about this weekend. Like, there's not a much better coach in the country at talent identification and acquisition as Mario Cristobal. But the games start, and it is just like a completely different story. And you'd think, knowing, hey, I've got the better team, I've got all of these guys that I spent all offseason scouting and paying money to and developing because I know they're good, I'd put some faith in them. But he didn't. You're exactly right. That was the most, like, clenched butt-cheek fourth quarter I've seen in a long time. I mean, you go back to the Syracuse game last year that cost them a playoff berth. They kick a field goal and put the game in the hands of their terrible defense rather than giving Cam Ward a fourth down chance. Cam Ward, the greatest magician of last year that went first in the draft. It's like the level to which he does not trust his own guys, who he has identified as the best players he can get, is mind-boggling to me.
I'm with you. I think that Mario Cristobal should, when the game starts, he should go find a sports bar and watch it there and let everybody else take over. Finally, we got about a minute left with David Hale. Clemson, not quite back to Clemson, or was that more about LSU?
A little of both. I mean, LSU to me looked like a genuine potential national championship contender. Like, that's a really good football team right there in a lot of areas. How they turned over that offensive line that put 4 dudes in the draft last year and still looked good for the most part was I thought, very impressive. A lot of it, though, is Clemson, too. Like, I will say I was not the biggest, like, beat the drum for Clemson guy this offseason. I thought you go back and look at last year, they got lucky in some games, and the ones they lost, they mostly lost pretty emphatically. And I thought there was still a lot of room that Clemson needed to grow. The lack of a running game, and frankly, what they did in the fourth quarter was the opposite of Mario. Their last 19 plays were all pass plays. Like, there's got to be more balance in your offense in a one-possession game than that. So there's just I am not writing off Clemson. I think there's still a strong argument they're the best team in the ACC, but it was not a well-coached game by any stretch. And I think some of the flaws in that roster, particularly once Antonio Williams went out early, were exposed pretty bad.
David Hale, no flaws. ESPN ACC scribe at a David Hale joint on Twitter. My friend, I appreciate your time. I'll talk to you soon.
Oh, it's a good time. Have a good one, guys.
You got it. David Hale here on the Adam Gold Show.